relationship specialist. I'd like to welcome you to Love, Listen, Talk, Repeat, a podcast that talks all about relationships. They come in all shapes and sizes, and each one's unique. So in this podcast, I chat with guests about life events and issues that can affect relationships, as well as discussing different types of relationships that may not always fit the mould of being mainstream. There will also be some episodes where it's just me talking about something that may be helpful in your relationship. So for now, just sit back and enjoy. Hi, it's Wendy, and today I'm going to introduce Taz Thornton. She is amazing. I heard her speaking and it was such an emotional and motivating speech. And I thought, I need this lady on my podcast because she needs to spread the word even further. She specialises in self-belief, confidence, personal brand and visibility. And as I said, delivers motivational speaking like never before. So I'm going to pass you all over to Taz, and she's going to tell us a bit more about herself. So Taz, introduce yourself, please.
Well, I think you've already done a wonderful job, actually, Wendy. As Wendy's already said, we met when Wendy was in the audience for a TEDx talk I was doing. And it was one of those talks where I was really taking my clothes off in front of the audience, not literally, but I was really making myself vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is one of those emotional states, because it is an emotional state, that everybody is afraid of. People are afraid that vulnerability makes them weak. And I actually think there's a real power in vulnerability. If you can get to the point where you are vulnerable and telling your story in front of people, my goodness, that is so empowering, because you're not just helping yourself, you're not just kind of pulling the plaster off all your own old scars and wounds, but you're showing other people what's possible. So although, yes, I specialise in confidence, empowerment and brand and visibility, what really launched me onto this career path, I was in journalism, publishing, marketing for years and years and years, and I'd never talked about being through domestic abuse. And it was pretty horrendous. The solicitor I was working with at the time, when I was extricating myself from that relationship, was close to retirement, and he was saying he'd only ever seen one case of domestic abuse that severe. Mm-hmm. But what left me feeling quite lost at the time was it wasn't I'm not even sure if this is the right way to put it, but it wasn't stereotypical abuse. There were no fists involved. And that for me at the time made it really difficult because I didn't know what to do with it. There was sexual abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And I used to sit and think, please just punch me. Please just give me a good old right hook, because I've been taught from being this high that if somebody hits you, you get out. And with this kind of grey area, I didn't know what to do. So I ended up really kind of unravelling from the inside out, not telling anybody about it, and ended up creating this plot to leave Earth. I went through, I considered suicide, and I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to leave the mess for my family. Considered all kinds of different things, slipped into clinical depression, was losing more and more and more of myself. And eventually I decided that this wonderful plan, and it was such an amazing plan at the time, it was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do, hallelujah, was to speak to whatever kind of God, universe, entity, whatever you believe in. I spoke to whatever was there and said, right, you haven't answered my prayers when I've asked you to give me a terminal illness. I've done a lot since to undo that, by the way, all my hippie shit coming out. You've not granted me that wish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take as many risks as I can every day. And if I'm still alive at the end of that day, I'm meant to be here. Then the day came when I was rushing to get to work. I was a news editor in a newsroom at the time. I was rushing to get to work early. I didn't need to rush to get to work early, but I convinced myself that I did, because that gave me an excuse to drive like an idiot.
Right.
And I overtook on the brow of a hill. And then another car came towards me, and I had this split second of thinking, this is it, I'm getting out. Pure bliss. and then realised that I didn't want to hurt anybody else in the process. I slammed my anchors on, pulled back around the car I was overtaking, lost control of my car, and long story short, ended up being stopped by a very helpful tree stump, writing off the car, and I'd broken my back in 3 places. And it was that point where something had to give. I was on a hospital flatbed for 9 hours with my head packed in sandbags, nobody telling me what was going on. And when I heard the word spinal damage, I thought, you're going to be paralysed, you idiot. You've tried to get out and you've made it worse. And something happened then. It was like a switch flicked in my head, in my heart, just this massive realisation that I could keep sinking, or maybe there were other people trapped in this grey area who didn't know what to do. And maybe this was happening to me for a reason and I could use it to help other people. So I started to build a plan there, and I got out of that relationship and I rebuilt. And I then went back into wearing lots of masks, went straight back into corporate, straight back into goal setting, straight back into safety zone, which was wonderful, and I was bloody good at it. And then it took the death of my father and a series of other really challenging situations in a short period to make me realise that I'd broken all those promises. I hadn't got out there and started telling my story. I'd boxed it all up, and I ended up hitting breakdown. And of course, all the stuff that I just put in boxes and neatly tried to file behind me, lids flung open, there's flies and crap and muck everywhere, and it all came and bit me in the backside. And that was complete unravelling. And I think that breakdown was my breakthrough. And I honestly believe that was the best thing that could ever have happened. Because if it hadn't, I'd still be sitting at the top of the tree in corporate publishing, thinking everything was wonderful, operating from the head, cutting off the heart. I was a head dragging around a body. And honestly, Wendy, the amount of people who still come to me now and say, Taz, I've heard you speak, I've read one of your books, I saw one of your videos, and that stops me from doing something silly, is amazing. And if I'd checked out when I wanted to, I couldn't have helped or inspired any of these people.
No.
That's me.
Yeah, and that's such an inspiring story, and I can relate to some of that, and suffered the emotional abuse that, and it, as you say, it I wished I'd been punched rather than, having that, because you doubt yourself. You doubt that it's done in such a way that you actually believe that you're led to believe that it's you. It's your fault.
Brilliant.
You're the one that's causing it. It's like, I likened it to water dripping on a stone. It eroded just very, very slowly.
Yes.
And I ended up trying to do everything in my power to try and stop, placate the other person.
Yeah.
I did anything and everything.
Yeah.
I even married them, which was pretty foolish to do, because I thought, if I marry him, then he'll know that I really am committed, that I'm not going to cheat, that I'm not going to do all these things.
Yeah.
All of that. And but it didn't make any difference. It just got worse. And like you, it got to that point where it's not that I wanted to end my life. I just didn't want to continue in the way I had.
Yeah.
And I sat there.
That's it.
I sat there looking at a pile of pills and going, I can't continue like this. But there was that, my family, I can't do this because of my family. I can't do this to them, but at the same time, I can't carry on the way I am. And it's the most horrible feeling. And thank you for sharing your story, because it just is. And I don't think anyone can understand it unless they've been through it or been close to it. And just trying to get out was really hard.
Yeah.
And it takes so much courage, because they plead with you, I didn't mean it, and I'm really sorry. You get all those stories. And
then we go straight back into mother mode and just see the small child that needs our care. Yeah.
Yeah. And that person did need a lot of care and attention, because they'd had a really shit life.
Yeah.
So I felt, well, then I understand that, this is the reason why, so therefore I can't be that unkind. And they were You know, they were making these claims. Well, if you leave me, then I'm going to end my life. All that was piled up on me.
Yeah.
And it's the most horrible place to be. But you know, at the end of the day, I knew at the end of the day, I wasn't the right person to help that person.
What made you get out, Wendy? How did you go from there to getting out of that relationship?
Yeah, it was a really, really strange situation, because they'd said to me, you are so good at listening. Why have you ever thought about being a counsellor? Now, that wasn't my career ever. I'd been in admin and finance, but I felt like a square peg in a round hole, but I didn't know anything else. So I thought, okay, well, I'll investigate it. Okay, let's see. Once I started that, and there's one tool that I learned very early on. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called the drama triangle.
Yeah.
And it is the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. When I looked at that and saw how that was going round and round in our transaction, the way we talked and behaved with each other, and we were moving from one to another. If anybody's listening, then look up the drama triangle. It's an incredible tool. When I realised that was going on, I thought, I've got to stop playing that game, because it's a psychological game. And once you step out, I stepped out the game, I stopped playing. And I actually said, I'm not playing anymore. Yeah. It was horrendous to get out of it, but I'm so glad I did. It was the best thing I did. But at the end of it, I had no confidence at all. My confidence was 50 miles below the Earth's surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
I felt so worthless, and I really, really didn't know how to pull myself out of it. I did, and I was determined to, but wow, like you.
When you were in that place, did you recognise that your confidence was so low? Because I know for me, because it had happened so gradually, that low place, that really low, way below the baseline level, had become the norm. Yeah. So I don't think I realised how low my confidence and self-worth were until I started to get it back.
Yeah.
It was a retrospective thing.
Yeah. Because as you said,
that's what traps us, isn't it? Because we don't know. No. That's what keeps us stuck. It's brilliant. I mean, to look, just to take a step back, it's anthropologically fascinating. It's a brilliant way of, it's manipulation, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're so clever that, we're both intelligent women and neither of us saw it happening.
No. And there's all that shame attached to it as well. Yeah. Because for me, how can I, as an intelligent woman who's run her life perfectly well before this situation, how can I admit that this is going on for me? It was so shameful. And to actually tell anybody not only was a shame, but when relating any part of the story, others didn't get it because it was in isolation.
Yes.
It was that, well, what is the problem with just texting them to say you're on your way home? It was, you can't explain it to anybody because it's not that one thing. It's every single thing that happens in your daily life, every part of it.
And because so many abusers who fall into, I guess that camp we now refer to as gaslighting, also fall into the kind of sociopathic box in terms of their behaviour, that complicates it further, doesn't it? Because we might be at home and seeing how terrible that is, but other people looking in see this really charming, wonderful person. Yeah. I remember there being times where I could be out with a group of friends and they'd all think it was wonderful, and I was feeling this big and getting whispered threats, and everybody else thought everything was fine, whereas I was walking on eggshells and falling apart. But
scared to say the wrong thing, and there were even those veiled threats. Well, if you leave me, I know someone who can.
Yeah, I had all of those. I had to go into hiding when I left. Yeah, and there were police involved at one stage. It got very. This guy had access to quite a lot of weaponry, shall we say, and it got really messy. And I don't wish them any well now, not at all. No, don't wish them any ill at all. I just hope that wherever they are, they're not perpetuating the situation with somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, I like to believe that whatever we're going through, everything happens at precisely the right time in precisely the right way. And if we can find the teachings in it and move on, then sometimes life deals us amazingly powerful lessons, but wrapped up in really shitty wrapping paper. You know? So it's not a case of, oh, woe is me. This is actually, that's a good point. That's what stopped me talking about this for such a long time, because I didn't want to be seen as being the woe is me. Oh, that's the abuse woman.
Yes.
And that stopped me talking about it for so long, because that's so not me. It's not. In fact, what started me talking about it was off the cuff a couple of years back. A pal of mine had put something on Facebook. And part of it said, you know, you've only got one life. It's not a dress rehearsal. And I was agreeing and nodding, and then thought, actually, I don't believe you do only have one life, but I do believe this is the only one we've got now. So I thought, I'll do a video. And it was before the days of live video. Yeah. And I sat there. I'd got scratty gym gear on. My hair was a mess. I thought, it's okay. It's just for my mates. And I rigged up my mobile in the sat-nav holder in the car and just talked. And this video broke every rule in the book. You know, I was off-brand. There was nothing. It wasn't planned. There were no bullet points to stick to. It was too long. It was about 10 minutes. And I put it out on Facebook. And I hadn't stopped to check the settings. I thought I'd just sent it to friends. And I hadn't. I'd left it. I'd put it public. And on the back of that, a few people said, well, can you put it here? Can you put it there? And I ended up putting it out on, I've got 2 Facebook business pages as well. And then I stuck it on YouTube because people were saying, I want to send that to my friend who isn't on Facebook. And I stopped counting at 40,000 views. And that went in HuffPost. It got me on BBC Radio. It got me in Diva Magazine, Kindred Spirit. It went ballistic, completely unplanned. And that was what started me on this path of talking about it in a way to try and empower people, rather than saying, oh, I went through this. It's kind of, I went through this, so what? You know, I crashed. Yeah. I crashed, so you don't have to. And if you have, that's okay. But there are people who've been through it and are now living the high life. Yeah. Whatever the high life is to you.
Exactly, because everybody's different. And I think the other big, you know, I think that's amazing that you shared that, because I think it's an important story. But I think the other thing is to be aware of is that some people find it so hard to leave. They struggle, and there's no shame in that, because
it took me several attempts. I left a couple of times and kept going back. The guilt kept going back. And then, because of, again, all my hippie shit, because, you know, I do a lot of spirituality work as well, maybe this person has been delivered to me because I'm meant to help them. Maybe I'm meant to go through this process. Here, you know. Yeah. We kid ourselves. We make it fit.
Absolutely. And I don't want anyone here, man or woman, who's watching this, to feel the shame that they haven't left or they can't leave. No. I mean, certainly find a way. There are organisations that can help, and I think it's important that people do get out there and find them.
It really is. Yeah. Even if you don't want to leave at this stage, at least find somebody to talk to. Don't get to the point where you're going to implode. And I'm so pleased that it's a strange word, isn't it? It's this gaslighting term. But I'm so pleased that it's at least being talked about a bit more now. So that we have more of a bench. There's not enough. We still need to have a bigger benchmark, a clearer benchmark. But the benchmark is no longer if somebody hits you, get out. It's if somebody doesn't respect you, if some consistently doesn't respect you, if somebody consistently tries to diminish you, make you feel small, and if somebody is consistently picking at you to the point where you are absolutely unhappy and you are dreading going home, then even if you're thinking, well, it might be me, talk to someone anyway, because that could at least get you some clarity.
Yes.
Try and find some benchmarks of your own.
Yeah. And it's, well, I mean, yes, of course I'm about relationships. That's what I do. That's my passion, and keeping relationships happy. But when I talk to people who are in abusive relationships, I would never, ever persuade someone to stay in it. And when I talk to women and men who've been in abusive relationships, because I talk to them as well.
It's just women. And sometimes on the flip side, the perpetrators need help too.
Yes.
Which doesn't mean you should stay in it and become the rescuer. That ain't going to work.
No.
But
no.
let's not demonize them either, because they're in a place where they're expressing their inner wounding in some way. And that's just that it's a cycle.
Yes. And I know that the reason this person was controlling was because out of fear. I knew that. But then I excused it because of that. But it wasn't helping. We were helping each other. But I think when I've talked to those people who've been in abusive relationships and they start talking it out, because sometimes they need that one. When you've left that relationship, you need to be able to express your feelings and talk through it and begin to heal and make some sense of it. And it's only afterwards they share with me, well, they did this. And I said, well, was that okay? Well, no, it wasn't. Actually, thinking back on it, it wasn't okay. And why, there's all of that, because they need to make some sense of what was going on, but they don't realise whilst they're in it, because as we both said, it was their norm.
Yeah.
And that just isn't helpful.
No.
To be in that.
No, it's not to stay there, at least. I think another interesting point that I found only recently, actually, over the past couple of years, because this was a long time, it's a lot of years ago for me. But sometimes, because my life is so happy for me now, comparatively, and of course I have crap days, everybody does. But sometimes I'll think back and I've turned things around so much that I think, well, was it that bad? Am I doing him a disservice? Yeah. And I will have blurred what happened so much, or parked so much, or worked through so much, and found the balance and collapsed some of those anchors to such an extent that sometimes I'll think, really? Did that happen? And I've been lucky so far, because if that happens, I don't know, a dream will come, or a memory will come up out of nowhere, or I'll actively go and look for something I wrote at the time to remember, yes it is, yes it was. And it's great, Taz, that you've moved on so far that you forget some of it, but it's still an important story. And I think for some people who I see going into this cycle of ending up in abusive relationship after abusive relationship after abusive relationship, it's sometimes because that process happens very quickly. We don't want to think about what happened, so we delete it, and then we're happy in that moment, and then we end up in the same situation, but on some level, psychologically, we've deleted what happened before, and then we find ourselves in the same situation, and we don't realise that we've repeated that pattern until it starts to happen again.
Yeah.
So we need to find a way to give ourselves reality checks, and no matter how happy you get, you still need to remember not necessarily the pain, because I believe that you can hold on to the teachings without holding on to the wound.
Yeah.
So you don't need to keep holding on to the pain and anchoring that in, but you do need to somehow give yourself a talking to and recognise these are the signs, this is what happened, this is how I started to feel when things weren't right. So although I'm now looking for a relationship that's going to be beautiful and loving, I need to be responsible for my own awareness to a point where I can start not walking around with a hammer and looking for nails, but I can hold on to enough self-awareness to recognise if I'm starting to fall into the same patterns and the same trap. And that can be so difficult to do. It really can.
It can, you're right. And I think that's what I help some people do. Let's talk through, what was it about you that encouraged that? What part did you play in it? And it's not that taking blame, but why did you allow that to happen? What was it about? And it's not about the shame, but was it because you cared about them? Was it because you didn't feel worthwhile? Was it because you felt trapped? Whatever it is, because that helps them identify what it was that encouraged them into that unhealthy relationship or allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, that awareness, because we all need to heal and know what it was that caused it, or the part we played in it, to be able to heal and then move into something more healthy.
And that there is quite a knife edge, isn't it? Because, again, I'm really big on self-responsibility. We all have the ability to respond appropriately to any given situation, responsibility. And it's really difficult sometimes to get that message across, particularly if it's kind of a social media update rather than video and it's just written text. It's really easy for people to look at that from a different mindset and say, well, that's victim blaming. No, it's not about blame on either side, really. It's about responsibility on both sides. And we have to take some responsibility for what happened. Of course, we didn't start slapping ourselves about and diminishing ourselves, but on some level, we allowed that to penetrate us.
Yeah.
We allowed that in. On some level, maybe we even attracted that in. So what is it? So it's not about going, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. It's about having enough awareness. A friend of mine used to talk about having an autopsy without blame. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. I like that.
Exactly it. Yeah, I like that. That's exactly where we need to go with it. It's not about, I'm a crap person, I allowed this to happen. It's about stepping back, taking the eagle's perspective and looking at what happened. These are all the pieces. Why did that piece end up there? That piece end up there? And what's needed? What's needed? What do I need to fulfill my life and to fill that gap within me, for want of a better phrase, in order for me to then not go and unconsciously seek that out again? You know, we don't need to say it's our fault in terms of we weren't the ones hurting ourselves, but I suppose on some level it is our fault. Everything's our fault, but all the good stuff's your fault too. You know,
yeah. And I suppose you can liken it to something very simple, like if you fell over on your step, walking out the house, you would and hurt yourself, really badly. Next time you would take more care.
Yeah.
As to why you tripped over that step. You
wouldn't just blame the step.
No, you wouldn't. And you say, okay, well, I tripped over the step. So what was it about that caused me to trip over the step?
Yeah.
And that's all it is, isn't it?
Exactly.
Put it in a really simple way.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly that. But getting to that point of responsibility is a really big step, isn't it? And it's really difficult. When we step into that place of accepting responsibility for everything that plays out in our own life, that's beautiful because then we have the power to change things. But it's also terrifying because we can look back at all the bad things as we perceive them and go, well, that was me too, and that was me. On some level, I played a part in that and that and that and that and that. So it's no wonder that we repeat the same patterns, because we don't want to look back and take ownership because that's too scary.
Yes. It's got to be the other person, because that's more comfortable place to look.
Yeah, in the same way that my life is crap because Donald Trump, because global warming, because Theresa May, No, actually it's not. It isn't. We try to find these external hooks for things.
And it's so much easier to blame someone else, isn't it? And, coming out of a really bad relationship to say it was their fault, because that we can make sense of that, and it stops us from feeling bad about ourselves because we did anyway. So to sort of say, well, yes, they were dreadful. They were a dreadful person. If that was the case, then 50% of the population of UK would be a bad person. And actually, they're not. It's just...
It's a bad situation that between you have created.
Yeah.
On some level. Yeah. I sometimes talk about Diana syndrome, when Princess Diana died. And there was this massive international, in fact, outpouring of grief. All these people who'd never come into contact with her beyond seeing a picture of her in a pretty dress in Hello magazine. And everyone is just sobbing and wailing. And that for me is a prime example of us looking for an external hook to hang all our woes on. Because they weren't actually crying because Diana had died. They were crying because that gave them some outlet for all the emotion they'd been holding in. And that's taking this situation onto a big level. But a lot of times people, when I say that, people get it. And it's the same with a relationship. Yes, domestic abuse of all across the spectrum is horrendous. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I don't have enemies. Probably do. I just don't know about them, and that's okay. But we still need to be able to say, well, okay, I've got my own stuff to deal with. And all the time we're putting all of our woes on the perpetrator, we're actually disempowering ourselves, because we are stopping ourselves from being able to change things and transform our lives and move to a place where we'd like to be. All the time we put all the blame on something else, whether it's our abuser, or whether it's Princess Di, or whether it's the government. We are taking the power away from us, and that's a scary place to be.
It is, isn't it? And I think I've learned over the years, I don't want to give my power to anybody else.
Yeah.
It's when it's not quite the same, but there are situations where people say to me, oh, well, they made me unhappy. They made me, it was them that did that. And I said, well, no one's got they haven't got that power over you. Why would you give that power to somebody else? Yeah. I decide, yes, of course I get upset when people say things that could be hurtful, or I might get annoyed at somebody cutting me up on the road or something, but it's my choice as to how that affects me.
Somebody can trigger an emotion within you.
Yeah.
But they cannot create and control your emotions. They can't make you unhappy. They can do something that pisses you off, and then you end up feeling wounded.
Yeah.
But they can create the emotional state. It's not the same. If somebody hits you, then yes, they give you a bruise. But it's up to you how you feel about that bruise in terms of your emotional state.
Exactly. Because as soon as you allow that to affect you to any degree, you're giving the power to that other person.
You're saying, I have no choice.
Yes.
And there's always a choice. Even if the options available to you, there's going to be some that you would never consider in a million years. It's still a choice you're not choosing to take. So that's a big thing for me when I hear people say, well, I had no choice. Yes, you did. Well, I'd never consider that. That doesn't mean it wasn't a choice.
No.
We box ourselves in.
Yeah, the choice might be unpalatable, but it's still a choice.
Yeah, to put a positive spin on that, sometimes I work with people who are going through kind of financial blocks, the I can't afford it thing. And I know actually a lot of people who've been through abusive relationships also end up in that hole, because when your self-worth's gone, then you're not in a position to outwardly start creating more of a positive mindset when it comes to finance.
Yeah.
But one of the exercises I give people is say, right, I want you to get a piece of paper, and I want you to write 1 to 50 all the way down the sheet. And then every one of those lines, I want you to write down a way that you could make money now if you needed to. And people go from really stuck to, well, I could wash cars, I could sell my body, I could do live modelling, I could go and pick fruit, I could make things, I could do admin, all of these things. And of course, you look down that list, I could become a hitman. You're never going to do it.
No.
And then I'll say, go through that list again and now cross out all the things you're never going to do in a million years. Okay, you've now still got a list of ways that you could go and make some money. Now cross out the ones that you probably might do, but you're not going to do now. And anything that's left, give yourself a deadline. When are you going to do it? And it's another way of looking at it, because we suddenly realise that we go from this place of, I'm broke, and who wants to say they're broken anyway? That's horrible. I'm broke, I can't afford it, I have no money. So actually, I have the potential to do all of these things. I have all of these choices. And we can apply that to anything. Write down 50 ways that you could make yourself laugh now. Some of them you're never going to do. But even if there are choices that you would never actually consider, don't box yourself into the point where you believe you have no choice. Because you're actually choosing to believe that you have no choice. And you can work that into any context.
Yeah.
We got to watch our words more, because these words spill out of our mouths out of habit. And every time we say them out loud, our brain goes, oh, right, I'll remember that. I'll make it so we can't afford things. No, I can't afford it. How am I going to manifest the money for that? When am I going to come back and get that? And we can apply this into emotional states. I'm not in a good enough state for that. I'm too stressed. Okay, how can I get myself into a state where I will be de-stressed and relaxed enough to do that? What do I need to do in order to do it? Instead of saying it's fait accompli, how do we achieve it? What do we need to do? What do we need to do to shift that? But that's scary too, isn't it? Because it means all things are possible.
It is. Yeah. It's scary, but it's very empowering too. I think it's just that thought that anything's possible if we choose to. And There's only one thing that gets in our way. That's us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we do. It's that fear of I can't possibly. Who do I think I am? Oh, that's too scary to do. I've got nowhere to go. I can't do that. As you say, I'm broke, or whatever those things are, and you just put it in the way. But actually, we're the only ones that stop ourselves from achieving what we want to in life. And you and I got out of those domestic abuse situations, and no, it wasn't easy. We're not going to say, oh, it was a revelation straight away. But it was a bloody sight better than being in it.
It took years. The action you take is always going to be better than the action you don't take. And there's one quick point I'd like to address before we wrap up on that, is I know there will be people watching this or listening to this who'll be looking at us and looking at the work that we both do now, you and I, Wendy, and saying, well, it's all right for them. It's all right for you because when you were in that relationship, you went out and got the training that enabled you to escape. It's all right for you, Taz, because look at what you're doing now. You're all over the place. You're on TV, you're in books. It's okay for you. It's only okay for us because we made it that way. And, I didn't have the skill set to escape when I was in it. I didn't have all of this training I have now in terms of, NLP and coaching and all the time spent with shamans and medicine people. I didn't have all this personal development stuff. That didn't come until much later. When I was there, all I knew was how to pretend to make a roast by buying a roast chicken from the supermarket and have it just pulling out of the oven as you came home. I knew how to fake a roast, and I knew how to be a journalist.
Yeah,
that's all I knew. So just if you're watching this or listening to this and having that it's all right for them reaction, that's absolutely natural, but it's not valid. There's so many people have extricated themselves from these difficult situations with no idea of how. And some of the people I've worked with since, I worked with some local authorities to run empowerment workshops for people who've been through abuse and have lost themselves. And every time people come in and they start like this, listen to this, it's all right for them. And gradually the arms unfold and gradually they realise. And I remember there's one lady who came on and her story amazed me. She had been systematically abused for years. She'd been kept on drugs and locked in a room. She'd been given, uppers when there was nobody else there and downers when there was somebody else coming to the house. And by the time she got out of that relationship, teeth had all rotted away. Her self-belief was through the floor. She was in a hell of a state. She lost her kids in the process because even though she had been drugged, she was technically addicted to substances. So she lost her kids. And she was through the floor. She was massively agoraphobic. She wouldn't leave the house because of being locked in this room. And she got her, I guess you'd call her a care assistant, to drop her right at the doorstep, right at the door of this event I was running. How she found the courage to walk in, I don't know. But by that lunchtime, she'd walked into town to get herself a sandwich. And when we talk about people taking massive action, that's subjective. Walking into town for her to get a sandwich was subjective. That was massive for her. That thing that we see as so simple was massive. Getting her teeth done, massive. Getting to the point where she went back out and got her GCSEs and went back as a mature student and got herself educated. In some of the educational levels that we would think, well, that's nothing, but for her, massive. She got her kids back. Taking her kid to see Spider-Man was massive. And I want us all to remember that if we're doing the it's all right for you, and if we're hearing people saying you need to take action and all this massive action stuff, just remember that massive action is subjective. Don't compare your life to anybody else's. One man's trash is another man's gold. It's subjective.
Absolutely. And I can think of a couple of things that I thought that come to my mind about having left that situation. I moved right away because I was scared of him and his sons and all of the other threats that were around me. It took the day that I opened my blinds was huge.
Yeah.
The day that I stopped looking around myself and running into the house and slamming the door was huge.
Yeah.
And it's all those things that they might seem trivial to some and big to others. It doesn't matter. For me, they were huge steps because I stopped being frightened.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's, I guess, to look at the kind of headline for that for me. It's the day I started to run towards the future I wanted to create instead of away from the past I was trying to leave behind.
Yeah.
The second I learned to live in the now without looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
And, that the day you opened your blinds, massive. And people need to remember that, because it's very easy to, again, see two outwardly confident, professional, successful women. Well, I can never do that. This lady I talked about, she's got a new partner. She's just had a new baby and she's happy as Larry.
Oh.
So there's happy out there for all of us, but we must find a way to not fall into the "it's all right for you" trap, because it is a trap.
Yes, it is. It's too easy to say exactly that, but that's why I want to reassure people that, as you did, it's that small step is so important. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's a big step for us, and it's a big step for that person who's listening.
Yeah.
Oh, Taz.
Wow.
I really like talking to you today. I never cease to be bored or disappointed at all by anything you talk about. And I know that I remember when you talked it was on social media, about abuse. It was the first time I'd heard you talk about it in any depth. It brought up so much for me, and I shared that with you. And I remember we had that kind of quick chat, you okay? Yes, I'm all right. It's just, it reminded me of what it was like. And I thought, this is what it would be so good to share on our podcast. So thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Is there anything else you want to share before, is there anything else I've missed or that's burning to you?
Let me think. No, the "it's all right for you" thing was a biggie. Just find it. People believe they've got nothing left, but if you had nothing left, you wouldn't be here and listening to this now. There's something. There will be, even if there's only the tiniest spark within you. It's there. You just need to find a way to coax that into a flame. And that sounds so cliched, but it's true. There's never really nothing left. It just sometimes feels that way.
Yeah.
The sun still comes up the next day.
Yeah, and just find that one thing. If you're feeling that low, find that one thing that you feel good about, whether it is you can stroke your cat, whether it is, your kids that make you smile, whatever that small thing is, when you're feeling that low, just grasp something that makes you feel good and know that you can cling on to that till you've got over that situation at that moment.
Actually, there is one more thing I'll say, because that taps into what you just said beautifully. With everybody who comes to me for kind of long-term coaching, I get them doing an exercise I learned from a shaman I used to work with called the Appreciator. And it's so simple. And I see so many people in the personal development world using a variant of it. And it's as simple as every morning when you wake up, before you do anything else, just list 5 things that you appreciate. Mm-hmm. And you do that every day. And if you do that every day, you form a habit, and you literally start to rewire your brain into looking automatically for the positive rather than the negative. And on those days where you think, I can't think of anything to be grateful for, if you've got 2 feet, be grateful that you have 2 feet. Be grateful. Appreciate the smell of coffee. Appreciate the rain, because even though it's drizzling outside, that means the grass is green and the trees are beautiful. Find the tiniest thing. I appreciate that I have 2 eyes and 2 ears and I can speak. I might not feel brave enough to speak out, but I have the ability to speak. Anything at all. And try and find 5 different ones every day. And on those days where you really don't want to do it. They're the days when you really need to. And that will make a difference. I've had people in an online program I run. I can't plug that because it's full now. I only take so many and I close it every year. And they've been doing that since middle of January. And people are just now, having been doing that every day, starting to pop in and saying, is it coincidence that I'm actually starting to find the positives in things? Is it coincidence that I haven't had a bad day for ages? Is it coincidence that I'm feeling quite happy? No, it's because you are working on rewiring your own brain. You are retraining your mindset. So do that. If you take nothing else from this chat Wendy and I have had today, do that. Start it now. 5 things you appreciate. They don't need to be massive. It could be, I appreciate the smell of baking bread. Anything. I appreciate that Lidl had a reduced loaf that I could bring home. Anything at all. 5 things every day. And I promise, if you keep at it, there's that self-responsibility thing, it will change your mindset. And that will allow you to grow. That will allow you to stop shrinking and start moving into expansion.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. I think that's really, really great advice. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Taz, how can people get in touch with you? I mean, all your details will be in the show notes,
yep.
But give us a quick kind of contact so that people, if they're just listening and haven't got access to the show notes, how they can get in touch with you.
You can find me at tazthornton.com. You can find me pretty much all over social media. Taz Thornton Official on Facebook, Taz Thornton, the Taz Thornton on Instagram. I think search Taz Thornton everywhere. You'll find me on. There's an Amazon author page. There's Facebook. There's Instagram. There's LinkedIn. There's Twitter. I am everywhere. Search Taz Thornton and you'll find me. And if for whatever reason you can't find my business page, ping me a friend request and say, hey, I saw or heard you with Wendy. Can we have a chat? And let's go. Let's do it. I'm pretty accessible.
You are. I see you everywhere on social media, and you're very easy to find because it's always bright pink everywhere, and it's just so recognizable. So yeah, lovely. Thank you so much, Taz. It's just been an absolute delight, and thank you for sharing your story. It's just been great. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing yours.
So you can find all the information about this show in the show notes. And you can find lots more on my website, www.yourrelationshipspecialist.co.uk, including the link to my podcasts. And you can also sign up on my newsletter, which has lots more tips and offers. So until next time, bye for now.